So you want to start milling your grains, but there are two big questions that immediately come to mind. One is how to buy a grain mill, and two is where can you buy grains for milling at home? Well, I've been milling my grains for well over a decade, and there are some key things that you need to know all about buying grains. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, I teach you all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So I teach you how to be milling grains, baking bread, why you should be doing it, all of those things related to milling at home. So let's actually talk about buying grains. This is actually one of my number one, top two questions that I always receive is, where can I buy grains? And there's more to this question than just where to buy them, because there are some key things that you need to know about before purchasing your grains, and we're going to be talking about those in this video. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about the easy question of where you can actually go to buy grains, because when you start milling your wheat especially, and you start looking around at grocery stores, you may notice that you don't find wheat berries in Walmart or Aldi or your typical grocery stores. So you generally have to go online or be a bit more creative of where to buy grains. So overall, I have a list of people, of farmers, of places that I recommend buying grains. If you just go to my website, grainsandgrit.com/buy grains, I make it a bit easier for y'all because I have a list of companies and farmers to purchase from, but I also put a list of what grains they sell to kind of help you save time if you're looking for specific grains. And just know that all the companies and farmers on there are ones that I have tried myself, that I certainly agree and put all my support behind. They are great companies to buy grains. But other than online, there are other places that you can possibly find grains in bulk, or just find grains, period. Unfortunately, these are basically based on where you live. So that's the beauty of online shopping, is that can happen no matter where you are. But for those of you who are lucky to live in certain areas, one is you may have access to some sort of Amish store, or the Church of Latter-day Saints or Mormons. They sometimes have places where you can go where you can actually buy wheat berries, maybe even request if they're able to order them for you. So those are options. And I know many of y'all, or some of y'all at least, have options for these type of places, but again, based on where you live. Another option is if you have some sort of local grocery store in your area, so not necessarily a chain, but a grocery store where if you go in the store and you actually see grain bins where you can maybe purchase 1, 2, 3, however many pounds of grains that you want, it is very possible that they will place an order for you. So for example, if you just talk to a manager or someone at that store and say, hey, I noticed that you sell hard red wheat berries, for example, would you mind placing me an order for a 50-pound bag? And I found that oftentimes that the store will be more than willing to do that whenever they place their order for their own shipment. So that's the way to do it, where you have someone local that you can pick up from. Now, doing it this way is you're going to be limited to whatever brands that they carry, because you're just going to be ordering that. So make sure you ask, hey, what brand of wheat berries do you use? Who do you order from? Those type of things. Now, the ultimate place to get them is actually from a local farmer yourself. So those of y'all who happen to live in a place that grows wheat or whatever grain it is that you're looking, this applies to beans, even grains like barley, millet, those type of places. If you happen to live where there are farmers around you, contact those farmers. Sometimes if you just Google it, maybe farmers in your area, you can maybe find one. Now, not all of them may do this, but it never hurts to ask. So if you know local farmers, because I've heard of some people just going right up to the grain silo and filling up a bucket or whatever it is for actually ridiculously cheap prices. But again, this is limited. I live in Florida. We do not have wheat farmers here. This is not an option for me. So if you're living in the breadbasket of the United States, or especially if you live in Washington, Oregon, those type of places, Texas grows grains. So it really just depends on where you're at, and you'll just have to look around. But buying directly from the farmer not only helps the farmer out, but you can usually get a really great price. Okay, so those are the options of where to just buy grains. Now, here are the key things that you need to know when purchasing grains to keep in mind before spending your hard-earned money, no matter where it is. So first of all, you need to understand, and I'm pretty sure this is a principle everyone knows, is that buying in bulk is certainly the way to go. If you go to these stores, I think like Fresh Market or Whole Foods even has it where you can buy like the wheat berries there. If you're only buying 1 or 2 pounds at a time, that is very expensive as opposed to buying 25 or 50 pound bags or buckets of wheat or whatever dried grain you're looking at. Now, I know some of y'all might think it'll take me forever to go through 50 pounds of wheat. And that may be the case, but just know that grains, real whole grains, store very well for a very long time, as long as they're stored correctly, which you just need a good container with a good lid to keep out your pest and your moisture. So I will link a video up here of actually how to store grains, give y'all tips. I've been doing this for well over a decade, so it's actually not as difficult. And so long as they're stored well, they're gonna last for a long time. So don't worry about, oh, I just spent this money on 50 pounds. It's gonna take me a year to go through. That's fine, so long as it's stored well. They're gonna be there when you need them. So that's the first thing to consider, and I highly recommend is just go ahead and buying them in bulk. The second thing that you need to consider is the cleanliness of the grains. You do not want dirty grains. You do not want grains that have rocks or sticks or anything like that, because if you throw those into your grain mill, it's gonna mess up your grain mill. That would be no good. The cleanliness of the grains, I can go ahead and tell you that everyone I have listed on my website, I have never had a problem with. They've been clean grains. The one slight exception, and this isn't even for me personally, is Azure Standard. So full disclosure, as I have actually seen in the past few years, some people, not everyone, posting on milling Facebook groups, things like that, saying that they have not received clean grains from Azure Standard. Now, I generally have seen this in regards to more of the hard red, hard white, or soft white wheat varieties, but just know that I have seen several people talk about this. I personally have not received unclean grains from Azure, but I also have not only been buying my grains from them in the past few years. So I'm not as up to date on quality control as other people are. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, many people have also said they haven't had a problem with Azure. So just keep that in mind. They're the only company, but I still support them. They're still a great company to buy grains from. But otherwise, everyone else, whether it's Gray and Teton, 4 Generations Organic Farms, Palouse, whoever it is, super clean grains. Of course, the next thing to consider is the price. And immediately when you start looking at all these different grain companies or the farmers, you're gonna notice a pretty wide range of prices. Azure Standard typically is the cheapest of the grains, but this is where you need to compare apples to apples, which kind of leads to the next few points. First of all, you need to ask yourself, well, are they organic wheat berries or are they conventionally grown? Obviously, we know that conventional grown is generally cheaper than certified organic. So that's one thing that you need to consider. Other things to consider, even if they're conventional grains, is, do they use glyphosate, desiccants, those type of questions, which usually if you're buying from any farmer or company, they're gonna tell you usually what they use, or you can contact them directly. And the biggest point that you need to know is how are they packaged? How are you purchasing them? This also can greatly affect the price. The reason I say this is, for example, like Azure Standard, generally you are only buying in bags. So these are like 50-pound bags, 25-pound bags, 5-pound bags, whatever. Where other companies may be sending them to you where bags might be in smaller quantities, but your larger amounts may be in sealed buckets with oxygen absorbers. Some are even shipped in Mylar bags in the sealed buckets with oxygen absorbers. So you really need to see how those grains are packaged and how you're purchasing them, because that affects the price point as well. And things to consider with this packaging is, first of all, if you're getting them in bags, you're going to need to very quickly get them in better containers, because if grains are just in bags, they are more susceptible to pest and moisture, which will ruin your grains. So that's time that you need to take to package them correctly whenever you get them, to store them correctly when you get them, as opposed to other places that I buy, and I buy the buckets of grain that are already sealed with oxygen absorbers, and I can literally just, as soon as I get them, put them in my shed and store them, and I don't have to do anything else with them. So these are all things that you need to consider, and that also affects the price. Another thing that affects the price is how do you receive your grains? So there are certain places, whether it is Breadbeckers or Azure Standard, where they are more co-op based. So you join a co-op, they're usually free to join, but then you actually have to find a drop, and on a certain date, certain time, you have to go and pick up your grains. So some of y'all may be lucky enough to only say be 5 or 10 minutes away from a drop, which is probably no big deal for you. But if you're like me, where I'm 30 minutes plus one way to a drop, you know, time can be money. You know, that is time out of my day that I'm having to go and pick up whatever order that I have. So that is very much something to consider, as opposed to companies that ship directly to your house. Super convenient, but you usually might be paying a little bit more for that convenience. But there are times in life where convenience really helps. The last thing that many people have questions about when buying grains is, how much do I need? And this all depends on how much you are baking, using freshly milled grains, things like that. Good news is I have a freebie for y'all. I have a free grains calculator that I will link below, and I think I can link it up here as well, that you can grab, where you just do some very basic math. It's okay. I walk you through the math to determine how much grains that you will probably need. This is an approximate amount because obviously things change, and the more that you do this, the more that you're going to be knowing how much grains that you go through. And this is definitely important, because I know when we first started milling our own grains over a decade ago, it was really just me and my husband. So 50 pounds for us could last us 6 to 8 months. Now, last time I checked, we are going through about 50 pounds of grains a month. So we are a very large family, and and I do a lot of the baking, and I use all freshly milled wheat. So these are things to consider. So that's an easy freebie to give you an idea until you figure it out on your own, of how much grains to buy. But again, like I said earlier, even if you buy a ton, so long as it's stored right, you'll be fine. Okay, so those are my best tips of just where and how to be buying grains from milling at home. Let me know in the comments below where you like to purchase grains, and let us know your experiences with different companies and farmers, because that also helps out other people as well. And if you're wanting to know how to actually store those grains, be sure to check out this video here. I got you covered. We go into detail on that. As always, I hope that y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.